Yeah, or no, it's right outside the. Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dandvaititam Gaganasadrisham Tattvama Shadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Bimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tannamami. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we, through that grace, go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So after meditation this morning at SRV Associations, we gather for Satsang, which is our Sunday morning occupation, followed by class in the afternoon, also live streamed. So we welcome the inmates of this ashram here this morning as they gather for hearing answers to questions, speaking philosophical explanations in the Atma Vichara vein, that is inquiry into the nature of the self. Don't need to trip up on that word self. This actually means the essence, sometimes called Atman or Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha, those kinds of ideas. That is not the small individual self, which is just a reflection of that greater self, but the indivisible self. There's also the cosmic self, or what we talk about as the cosmic personality, but the supreme self, the Paramatman, is what we refer to. It's always in a state of not two-ness, as we say, or eternal oneness, if you would. And so we meet to discuss those kinds of questions that come up around trying to realize it in our lifetime. And the questions that come in have to do mainly then with that Atma Vichara process, problems that are encountered in sadhana. Sadhana is the cutting edge of spiritual life, which will transform the mind and ego complex, and if it's kept up over a period of time, hopefully all one's lifetime, maybe even in the case of Shankara and other great seers, they keep it up even after they get their mind in an enlightened state, so that they keep the mind wiped clean, because the teaching is that manas, or human mind, which is fourfold: its thoughts, its ego, its intelligence, and then its own dual nature. As we just chanted, may we go beyond pleasure and pain and life and death. That duality that's always occupying our mind, that mind is imperfect by nature. It's always subject to the gunas, as we've been speaking about in many of our satsangs, the three modes of nature. And the attack of these dvandva mohena, these opposing pairs of opposites that are always clashing in it, so that it has a hard time finding peace As our Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi said, you need peace of mind first and foremost. So we should always look towards that. And some of these questions actually bridge on that subject. One that came up last week about prayaya vritti. Vritti means vibration. And I thought maybe the word had been pralaya vritti, so I was explaining it in terms of the dissolution of everything at the end of long cycles of time called yugas and mahayugas. So I need to not retract that, but rephrase it in terms of the word prayaya instead of pralaya. Prayaya vritti is this very wholesome practice of concentration that thins thought down by degrees. And the question here is, could you please describe the practice and process of prayaya vritti in relation to meditation and mantra recitation? So those two things are, again, cutting edge of spiritual practice, sadhana. Mantra and meditation are these two main practices that we engage in, and which help the mind get into that peaceful state of shanti, shanti, shanti. Bring peace 3 times into all levels, or to all 3 bodies of the human being, human soul. So to explain the practice and process, I can use an example from my own life this morning when I got in my car and started driving and made it about a quarter of a mile and the car died. So I had to walk back and find another ride. So then, of course, found a ride here, sat for meditation at 6 a.m., and the mind's thinking, wonder what's wrong with that car now. And then it tends to go off into other thoughts. Maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, or what am I going to do when I get home? So you're thinking about past, what happened in the past, and you're thinking about what's going to happen in the future, and you're mulling over everything. So you can't have that happen in meditation. And thankfully for myself, my meditation is about 40 years long. So I'm aware of what the mind throws up all the time, as you should be as you get into daily meditation. That one of the best practices until you begin getting these deeper inner experiences, which are also mentioned in one of these questions, is that you deal with all of the mind's vicissitudes and the gunas as they raise up in the mind, and learn how to smooth them out. Well, prayaya vritti is a lot like that, vibrations of the mind. And you want to bring forward a power of will that will seek them out where they rise, and then begin to disintegrate them. That is, it's not so much a power of resistance of will as it's just the ability to seek them out and quell them, take them back to the source from which they arose, which is this dual mind. So then you, as I was saying in the analogy this morning, I just went ahead and saw that happening in the mind, and so I just used mantra. Pull out your japamala and remember your teacher, remember your mantra, and begin to recite it in your head. And then that's one way in which you can quell these vrittis, prayaya vrittis, that are raising in your mind, so that you curb the tendency of the mind to do that. Now, in cases which a person doesn't have as much control of the mind as someone who's been practicing for 40 years, then of course it's more difficult, and the downside of this running mind is that it begins to develop a habit around these vrittis, these vibrations of mind, and so then people begin to live in a mode based on these habits, and sometimes they live in them so long they don't even realize that they have these patterns, and it becomes normal to them, or average, or to the spiritual aspirant it's obvious that those vibrations are in the way of spiritual practice, the spiritual practice of one-pointedness, or if thine eye be single, you shall know the truth. So then it becomes harder for the novice or the person just coming out of worldly life into religious practice to focus the mind, and then you get these problems that Father of Yoga has talked about, like mudda, dull mind, and kshipta, erratic mind, unhealthy mind, fragmented mind is a good word. The mind becomes fragmented and it lives in one little compartment of itself and then bounces to another. So all these little compartments of consciousness, like cells, are there, and your consciousness shifts from one to the other. Well, the watching of this shifting, just like you watch your breath at the beginning of practice, is a process, a part of the process of prayaya vritti. It's a word that occurs in Yoga Vashishta. It's one of those great ancient scriptures of India that we point to, along with the Gita, the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutras, and so forth. Ashtavakra Samhita, Avadhuta Gita, these are all, again, using that word a third time, cutting-edge scriptures that help you with that cutting-edge sadhana of mantra and meditation, because it's all really about the mind. And when our Holy Mother again said, the mind is everything, my child, you have to be very careful with it in this particular phase of existence, means as a human being. There are many other things to be other than a human being, but you might have noticed that when you come into a human context with body-mind mechanism or psychophysical being, then you're working with certain limitations and difficulties that are at the individual level and then collective level, and then of course if you shift to inner life, cosmic level even. So inside of the human context, the working with this mind to try and even it out, to balance it out, to gain equanimity is crucial for your spiritual life and for any lives that come afterwards, or to any terrain, inner terrain that the consciousness might visit, because again, consciousness shifts from, just like in a fragmented mind, then it shifts from one fragment to the next in little perspectives. There's also a broadening for the mind that's more focused, and it begins to open up the kingdoms of heaven within it, begins to get grander and grander views, and then it shifts between those. So the shifting mind is a problem at first, but when you broaden its capacity, then it has the ability, or acquires the ability to focus for longer amount of times on wider peripheries, like the scriptures say, or the teachings. The teachings become, instead of fragments of erratic thought bouncing about, all of a sudden your mind is concentrating on pools of Mother's wisdom, just like if you would go to the 7 sacred pools on Maui. So you jump in the first one, swim there for an hour, jump in the second one, hike up the valley, jump in the third one. So you're jumping into these little pools of wisdom, and that's where the seers get bliss. This ananda begins to come, where rolls the stream of knowledge, bliss, and the truth that follows both, to quote Vivekananda. So they begin to just spend time. So fragmentation becomes less of a problem and more of a solution at that point. Well, prayaya vritti is sort of like that. Your vibrations first in your mind are somewhat erratic and hard to control, and you make it a little bit worse by calling it a problem. See, but the yogi always is looking for solutions that are, maybe call it non-conventional solutions, and that's one of them for this particular practice. It's just focusing in on with your willpower and quelling those thoughts, making that ocean of mind that was, or that lake of the mind that was wind blown and with many little waves, stopping the wind. The wind usually is called desire, by the way. You'll find that most of your vrittis or vibrations are caused by desires, and then attachment sets in later, and that turns towards that habitual road, but the sevenfold road to ruination, as we find in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna teaches. So that's a little bit about the process and the practice of prayaya vritti, and mantra is one way of doing it because you're repeating the names of the Lord with a power bijam. And another way is, you might call that the way of God with form. People who are trying to get to the Father through the Son, and they need this kind of support. And it's a very powerful support. And then there's the way of the more non-dual meditator. And so he or she is doing it more through just sitting alone and calming the mind in that way. Doesn't necessarily using the mantra, but is beginning to learn how to focus at that sixth chakra. And a natural focus of meditation will, on some days, naturally cut down the vibrations of the mind so that you can stay longer and longer in those pools of focus. So taking fragmented mind and turning it into vikshipta mind that's sometimes focused and then sometimes falls out of focus. There again is a third kind of mind that is a problem, isn't it? But if you call it a problem, then you make it a problem. So you start putting more of your consciousness into the focused part of vikshipta mind and watering the flowers instead of the weeds, as we say in Vedanta. And that begins to take energy away from the unfocused minutes or hours that you would spend in meditation, hopefully reducing them to a great extent. So inner practice is very subtle, and the mind is a very intricate mechanism, has to be dealt with very carefully and very methodically and step by step, without too much anticipation or expectation out of it, and also without watching for too much in case indeterminacy or depression at failure of meditation begins to creep in. You have to find a balance between those two things. So that's the process and practice in a nutshell of pryaya vritti. All kinds of vrittis are potentially problematic, but as we say, when the mind vibrates at the level of study of scriptures like swadhyaya, then it begins to really get control of all of its tendencies. You could call all of these things practices because the soul is never erratic. That is the Atman, the Buddha nature. It's never out of balance. It's never erratic. And maybe that's the subject for your meditation. You see, those persons who aren't using mantra or don't have that mantra, the inclination for it, or have yet found the teacher for it, or the ideal, the ishtam for it, then their meditation is going to be fueled by that kind of concentration, and that will begin to reduce all vrittis. Even the vritti of sleep, they say, begins to be reduced by that kind of focus, and instead of going into a state of imbecilic dreaming where you have all these silly dreams, or going to deep sleep and not knowing what happens to you there when your mind goes into a formless state, then the consciousness, you begin to go into light more. You see light in dreams. And there's so many stories about the direct disciples of Ramakrishna. I remember Swami Vedananda, who was called Kali, when he was a boy, spent time with Holy Mother serving her. And he used to go see Sri Ramakrishna. He'd sneak out of his parents' house at night and walk across the jungle and to get to the Dakaneshwar temple just to see Ramakrishna, because his parents didn't want him seeing that crazy Paramahamsa there in that temple. But Vedananda, of course, was attracted to spirituality, so he went, and he describes in some of his testaments in his books how his ever since he met the Paramahamsa, his meditations were always attended by light. All he could see was light everywhere, even when he came out of meditation. So this was a young, teenage boy. So there's another aspect to a practice of quelling vrittis, is holy company. So if you can find a great soul or a sangha that is focused, as we were saying, in something like this, satsang, sat truth sangha, a group, then those vrittis can become more naturally under control. You don't have to force it or strive so hard. The mind will fall naturally into peaceful balance. So, study of scriptures, attending on holy people, all of these are mainstays of spiritual life. And the more you do it, the longer you do it, the greater the chance and opportunity there is for the mind to finally find its one-pointed focus. And then the practice of prayaya vritti reaches its consummation. So a little about that last week I wasn't able to get to. Now, there's another short question here. How would you explain how renunciation is deification? Well, that comes from a saying of our own guru, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, who was the last living monastic disciple of Sri Ramakrishna in Portland, Oregon, where I grew up. And I was born across the river from him, and lived across the river from him for a long time. So then I finally came to know of his presence there in Portland and came to him. And when we were attending many of his discourses, which were really more like transmissions of wisdom, he would be very animated on the podium every Sunday and speaking in terms of Vedanta, and then satsang at night like this. So we heard him say more than once that renunciation is not condemnation, it's deification. The idea being that when you get particularly a darshana like Vedanta or Buddhism that comes really, that thrives, might say more aptly put, that thrives in a monastic setting so well, and then has to sort of vibrate into the regions of the householder practitioner and so forth, then you find you bring that kind of darshana to the West and give it to Westerners who are fixed in opulence and loving materiality and so forth, and using their senses as their only means of satisfaction. Then it produces guilt and shame and so forth. When it can lead to those things. So better to spend some time with those teachings on renunciation, and enough time spent, like we were just saying, in anything with holy company, then you begin to understand that that's not the point of the teachings, that renunciation is actually something very healthy for everyone, because it destroys attachment, as we were just talking about, and attachment to objects, and it lessens one's desires. It actually transforms negative desires into positive desires. And to know the difference is discrimination or viveka. There's a question here about that, which we can get to. So the real essence of it, if it could be put into words, is that you love the world so much, you love God so much. Well, you love the world so much at first that you don't see God, but then you begin to turn the mind towards divine reality. It doesn't have to be with a form. You can feel it in formlessness, as we were just describing between the mantra and meditation. There's sometimes two different paths there for people, the path of form and the path with formlessness. But if you begin to take love of the world and transmute it or transform it, and you begin to have this deeper inner feeling for divine reality, whether it comes through worship or whether it comes through meditation or study, the four yogas, as we say, then all of a sudden the very world that is there in front of you turns into divine reality. It's a very strange alchemy that happens, spiritually speaking. And that's where that thing which you at first loved and then later found out was false, or needed to be, the perspective around it needed to be changed because of attachment, then that very thing begins to transform in front of your very eyes and turn into that very reality. And that's a very subtle alchemy that can only be explained and expressed by somebody who's actually experienced it. And then it also explains this very unusual phenomena of these enlightened souls we see who are sitting like Ramakrishna or Manoharshi and so forth in perfect equanimity all the time without being touched by the changing phenomena that's going on all around them, and their mind staying in an equal place, always focused on divine reality and never called out by the world bewitching Maya, as Sri Ramakrishna has called it. And for them it's really long ago become more than even a habit, because you don't see them doing mantra or meditation practice anymore. My teacher never did meditation in his older days. He just was walking around in meditation because Holy Mother had told him, or to ask him, does God exist only when eyes are closed and cease to exist when eyes are open? So he began to realize that this divine reality didn't have a day and night. And one of his favorite poems was, "A man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. Now all my dreams have been turned into radiant meditations." So all aspects of life or existence have all of a sudden become this walking, open-eyed or closed-eyed meditation. I mean, it's called third eye meditation at that point. And so at that point then, somebody like Swami Sheshananda, who was this illumined teacher we had, would say, renunciation is not condemnation. It's real. It's deification, because he's looking at Western householders, looking at him as a monk who's been a monk for 60, 70, 80 years, and they're looking at him as an illumined soul, or as an example how to follow Indian philosophy to its end and get realization. And then they're seeing a monk there, you see, and how easy it was for him, apparently, to just renounce the world completely, and they're still in the midst of it, you see. So in this struggle that they're in the midst of, all of a sudden this ray of light comes through, and this monk who's been a monk for so long all of a sudden says to you, but renunciation is not condemnation, it's deification. And everything you had heard prior to that sounded like you had to condemn the world. That is, you had to get rid of it, throw it out, get thee behind me. Well, certainly those aspects of the world that are evil or that are imbalanced and that are unhealthy, you have to get them behind me. Those are devilish, which is what Christ meant by the statement. But those things, once you're beyond them or they're behind you, then all of a sudden you see the residue of that. What's left over is trees and oceans and lakes and everything turn into nothing other than a reflection of your own consciousness, minus the poison that was there before. So really that's the art of transmuting the poison of relativity into the nectar of immortality. Amrit, it's called. Amrit. And then you are drinking that nectar everywhere, chanting Om Kali, Om Kali. He drinks the nectar of the precious fruit, of her precious fruit, you see. So that precious fruit has been gained by renouncing all things other than her. So you begin to see the world as Brahman. And we hear that said enough times, how all this is Brahman, but we don't know how we got to that conclusion or how they got to that conclusion. And if we jump to that conclusion prematurely, then it's not going to work. So you have to do it step by step so that you see the process taking place inside of you, because that's where delusion happened, inside of you. It had its own process, and now you have to take it apart the way you put it together. So that's a bit of the dynamics around this great statement. Renunciation is not condemnation, it's deification. Now, you can take this same, the dynamics I was just explaining were more for the wisdom knower, the one who's approaching the wisdom path. But for the bhakta, going to practice the puja, you see, for instance, and all these things is going to deify them. It's going to clean all the articles say mantras over them, and arrange them all and get them ready to worship. And so that's the way a devotee, even every day at their own house in front of their own private shrine, will deify everything. And that's called Vaidya Bhakti. That's the beginning stage of bhakti. And then by practicing that and deifying everything, making everything sacred, that's called sacred location. There's sacred location, there's sacred energy, and there's sacred food, and then there's sacred thought. All of those are different levels of your consciousness. And by observing that long enough, then all of a sudden Vaidya Bhakti turns into Raga Bhakti. Raga Bhakti is that you feel this energy that you were initiating by deifying all articles and images and so forth, all of a sudden takes itself and transplants itself in every other article, like trees and oceans and wind and things, you see. All of a sudden that seems divine to you, and you see God existing in that. Well, it's sort of like when you were a child, how you had this sort of innate wonder around nature. So you lost that somewhere along the way, evidently, you see. So then you have to recreate it. So you have to begin deifying it. And, in order to get into the kingdom of heaven, you have to be like the little child. So you have to bring back that sort of innocence. Not childishness, but childlikeness. And that process of doing Vaidya Bhakti to Raga Bhakti is bringing back the wonder of things. It's a conscious deification of the things around you. And then that turns to Prema Bhakti. Vaidya Bhakti, Raga Bhakti, Prema Bhakti. And when Prema Bhakti comes, then it's seeing that Brahman in everything. So that same process I just described to you through the neti or discrimination process can be done also, or is done also, by the devotee through the bhakti process, devotion, through worship or puja. And so those are some of the dynamics in both wings of the bird, of how this renunciation really is deification. You have to make it so, of course. You can't just say that beautiful English mantra that he coined and then just sort of hope that it's going to happen or pretend it's going to happen. You have to make it so. And bring your own consciousness to bear. And actually that's really the key, because consciousness, as I was just saying, is ever pure, isn't it? It doesn't change. It's in one balanced state all the time. And it's innately blissful. So when you get in touch with that consciousness, it's going to be easy to deify things. You're going to see it as a natural occurrence, even in your everyday life, even going to work or brushing your teeth, as they say, or petting your dog or so forth. It's just all this divine energy and everything that was covered earlier by some covering power, like Avarana Shakti. And all of a sudden you stripped that covering off it, and you saw this consciousness, living consciousness in everything. You have to sort of imagine it first, and then envision it next, and then realize it after that. Yesterday's imagination is today's, imagination is today's envisionment. See, and today's envisionment then becomes tomorrow's realization. So one proceeds like that too. And you might say that's the same process in meditation, how you deify things. You start with imagination, and then you turn that into vision, and then vision into realization. And that's the kind of way that you do it in that third yoga. It's how you deify things. But then again, you have to bring your consciousness forward and make it real, make it a real process. And not just a habitual ritual that you do. That rhymes, habitual ritual. Not just that, but you actually bring your consciousness to bear on it every day until it stays, until it finally sticks. And when it appears like that, then you have these beings going around in subtle bliss, and they're always sattvic, and they're always welcoming you, and they're always happy and content and so forth. And then that you know that they have succeeded in the path of renunciation and deification. So it's not condemnation. You don't have to give it up because it's evil. You have to change it into what it truly is. An expression of Brahman. Everything is an expression of Brahman. Even poison is a kind of expression of Brahman. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that there's poison in the snake, but the snake doesn't die because of that. But you may die if it bites you and injects you with it. So there are just certain things you have to work on transmuting. The poison of relativity into the nectar of immortality, Amrit. See, that's a process Shiva does. That's why his throat is blue in those pictures, because he's taken the poison, drank the poison of the world. Hala hala, it's called. It's almost like a Hawaiian word. And then Parvati touched his throat there so it wouldn't go to his stomach and kill him. He took all the poison of the world, took the collective karma away, and is always transmuting it into something beautiful. Like taking poison again from a snake and making an anecdote out of it, you see. So antidote, not anecdote. It's just, and then that same poison becomes something positive. See, it was negative in the beginning, positive in the end. So that's this transmutation process, and it's the same then here. Renunciation is not condemnation; it's deification. Again, a positive thing that the practitioner must engage in. Now, that's 2 of the 4 questions that are here, and it brought up the process of discrimination. And there's a question here, and where the questioner asks, sometimes I have heard people raise objections to the idea of philosophy or philosophical discrimination. That's called viveka. They say, oh, that's only philosophy. I'm interested in the real world, unquote. They seem to think that abstract always means unreal. Yet one thing I've noticed over the years as regards contemplation of abstract principles is that whenever such contemplation leads to some sort of insight, I find that this produces a tangible change in the experiences that arise in my meditations, or are possible in meditation. Sometimes I would say this produces a very real change in the way I experience existence. Please speak to the relation between philosophical discrimination and the knowledge of reality. Well, there's no doubt that the 2 are practically one. It's just one is a different phase of the other. There's a teaching in Vedanta called 3 Proofs of Truth, for instance, where you start with manana and then, or shravana actually, to hear the truth, and then you manana, roll it over in your mind, and then nididhyasana, you realize it, you get the essence out of it. That famous quote, for instance, from the Vivekachudamani, Shute shatagunam vidyan mananam mananarapi nididhyasam lakshagunam anantam nirvikalpikam. Nirvikalpikam is the highest samadhi you could have. Nirvikalpa samadhi, non-dual samadhi. So he starts out, he says, to hear about Brahman is good, and to meditate upon Brahman is better. The better still is the realization of Brahman. See? And better than that is that meditation in which all doubt dies away forever. So you realize Brahman and all doubt goes away, and you have this oneness with Brahman all the time. I and my Father are one, Tat Tamasi, this self is Brahman, I am Atma Brahman. All those sayings all of a sudden become real and true for you, actualized in your daily existence even. So that's, philosophical discrimination has made that possible. So people who say these things, like it's not important or so forth, or that's unreal, we have a different understanding of what the word unreal means. What they're calling unreal is what we call the process leading to reality. And what we call unreal, what they think is real, we're calling physical objects, attachment, desire, disappointment, and so forth that comes from everyday life, because you haven't been able to renounce, see, properly, like in the last question. there's a certain condemnation going on there in pleasure, not being able to see reality as it is, even see all of this as a reflection of reality or an expression of reality, if you want. So this process of neti-neti quite often seems like a kind of poison to most people, but we see it as a kind of alchemy again, an antidote for the real poison of Maya. So that's why we engage in this process. It's not only philosophy, it's actually philosophy with a capital P, and real bhakti, as we were describing with deification, is religion with a capital R. And those two things we bring together, two wings of a bird, religion and philosophy, and bring them back in a new way. You see, that's actually what the Vedanta and Buddhism and yoga, those kinds of darshanas from India, bring to us, bring us the opportunity of reconnecting with reality that we've become so distanced from for so many centuries, maybe millennia. So here we are with great souls like Vivekananda, whose very name means the bliss of discrimination between the real and the unreal. He took it as his very name for the 39 years he was here among us in recent times, in late 1800s into the early 1900s. So in those 39 years he was here, he was showing us, just by taking the name, how important the process of discrimination between the real and the unreal is. Again, sort of like the poison and the nectar, and being able to transmute one into the other. So not just a connection between philosophical and discrimination and knowledge of reality, but that the two are really one. When you're on the path of discrimination, you're already at the goal. When you've reached the mantra and gotten it from the teacher, you're already enlightened. Now, how long is it going to take for your mind to realize that? The mind is slow, you see, compared to divine reality. And the speed of light is slow compared to the speed of mind. And the speed of sound is slow compared to the speed of light. So you're stepping up in vibration, see, in the swiftness of vibration, subtleness of consciousness as you go from sound to light to mind, that is thought, and then from thought to non-duality. The quickest way to do that is through discrimination between the real and the unreal. Bhakti is the slow boat to China, or to India in this case. But philosophical discrimination is this sword stroke. That's why Mother holds the sword, because she's making that possible for beings who want to cut through the maya of this world and get straight to the essence of a thing and live in that essence. That's the purpose for living a dharmic life, a divine life, or transcending life and death entirely. So, abstract is a good word. There's very few words in English that we can use to describe non-duality or those stages leading up to non-duality. Steps that almost become invisible that you have to take, like a cliff that has barely toe holds and then it just has fingernail holes, and finally you have to start pounding pitons into the face in order to create your own holds. So non-duality becomes subtler and subtler like that, and words like abstract or inscrutable or enigmatic, those are perfect words in English to describe that face, sheer face of reality that you have to go up in the final reckoning of spiritual life on earth here in the body. So let those who object to that path, let them find it on their own over time. There are other ways to go up that slope. Not everyone can go up the sheer face, but when you do come to the attainment of nirvikalpa, nirvikalpakam, as Shankara said in that chant, then it's going to require a combination of hearing the truth, shruti, rolling it around in your mind for a while, shravana, or sometimes called manana. Manana means mind. You roll it in your mind. And nidijasana. Nidijasana is also another word for that, called aparokshanubhuti, means the direct experience of divine reality that's gained through these practices that you are engaged in at that very subtle level of spiritual practice. Now, another question has come in from one of our viewers saying, oh, and good, it's about Shankara, because we were just talking about him. Shankara summarized the yamas as restraining the senses by the thought, all this is Brahman. How does this mental posture help me practice brahmacharya and control desire? Not how, it does. Again, one has to bring one's consciousness to the fact. When you're in the mode of questioning, you're quite often putting yourself in a clueless position. See, so, I mean, I remember our founder, Lex Sixon, was a very good questioner, but you came to realize very soon that he was questioning for everyone in the room. Everyone in the room was quiet because they didn't want to show how ignorant they were by asking a question maybe, or maybe they were just shy. Whatever the case, our founder, Lex Sixon, would burst through that and just ask any question. Then he could almost like he could pick up questions in the room, and then he'd ask the Swami or ask the Tulku or Rinpoche or Dalai Lama or whoever had to be there. And they would just break down the barriers and ask these questions for people. And so he was showing a different kind of questioning, a sort of questioning via already knowing the answer. So you should assume that position. The questioner asks here about mental posture. That's manasana. There's a chart I've been showing recently in class. Manasana, we talk so much about physical asanas, but we should start realizing mental asanas are very important, much more important than physical ones. In fact, the physical ones will just calm down and quiet to ekasana, one position, when you get this mind in the one-pointed state. If thine eye becomes single. So doing that is assuming a posture. We can't work with the mind like you can work with the body, right? Take it out and shift it into different positions, like manipulating or massaging your brain or something, some cranial sacral thing you do. See, basically, it's, massaging the mind is going inside and with the scriptures and or with the mantra. We were just talking about that, right? Some people will go through the scriptures, some people will go through the mantra. The scriptures and the mantra both have been described like scrubbing bubbles that get down into the subconscious and unconscious parts of your mind and do their work. What people don't like about it is when they scrub down there with the mantra and the scriptures, then old karmas begin to surface, and that makes them uncomfortable. They have to work through these old karmas. That could take a lifetime. You have to realize karmas that were formed by many lifetimes of repetitive action, and these karmas are not only negative, but they're also mixed, and also good karmas. Good karmas quite often act as a barrier to non-dual realization. So whatever the case is, at least you know that these methods of scriptural study, swadhyaya and mantra practice, are doing their work when you feel this poison start rising in you, these uncomfortable feelings. Holy Mother called it like rolling threads off a spool once they've been wound on. White, red, and black threads, you see. Like the three gunas or the three kinds of karma. So you wind those on for several lifetimes, and then all of a sudden you say, this isn't working, I'm getting too fat. You see, my spool is getting too fat. I want to thin out my mind now, make it more transparent, lighter. And so you take a mantra, or you take a teachings with a teacher and a path, and the spool stops right at that moment, as soon as you get the mantra, as soon as you take the commitment, and it starts slowly unwinding. And when it unwinds, you feel all the effects of that you rolled on in reverse fashion. And that's where you get these teachings like burnt strings can't bind you, or burnt ropes can't bind you. People come and they say, oh, I'm doing practice, and this thing is happening to me, and this thing, I thought it was going to be all bliss, but there's some really uncomfortable things happening to me. And the teacher goes, great, it's working. Keep doing that, please. Don't give that up. keep being uncomfortable, please. You roll them on through comfort, you're going to have to roll it off through discomfort, you see. So when that happens, then all of a sudden the mind wakes up one day and you've got, my delusion was gone, utterly gone. Ram Prasad sings in one of his songs. I woke up one day and my delusion was gone, utterly gone. So all of this happens, and as the question you just wrote in relation to the first question, all is Brahman, right? Just like we were just saying there, condemnation, renunciation is not condemnation, it's deification. So you come to this realization that all this is Brahman, you can't deny it, and so you're stuck with it. You see, you're just hit in the face with it, and that causes a stunned state of awareness for a while. And you have to contemplate that, manana, see? And then nididhyasana, you'll get the actual experience of it if you contemplate it. So whether you call it shravana, manana, or nididhyasana, or shruti, yukti, and anubhava is another word for it, means direct spiritual experience. You must have that process going on in you. I would even venture to say that the bhaktas who are practicing puja have a certain kind of shravana, manana, nididhyasana going on inside of their bhakti practice. And obversely, the jnani has devotional moods going on inside of his jnana practice. So you can't separate these two. It's not like, oh, I'm a jnani, not a bhakta, or I'm a bhakta and not a jnani. That's not going to work. And it's proven by the fact that Krishna says right out front in the Gita, nobody can get away from doing work. What you have to decide is what's obligatory work and what's non-obligatory work. What works are spoken to you as necessary by the scriptures and what are to be given up and renounced. So even inside of the karma yoga, you have this very deep need for discrimination, don't you? Even inside just the karma yoga vein. So isn't it going to be also necessary to have a certain sort of discrimination in jnana yoga, that is meditation? Is my meditation real or unreal right now? Is it faked or is it authentic? See, is it high or is it low? Is it dazed or is it actually waking up? There's a certain kind of subtle discrimination, viveka, that goes on in jnana yoga and in bhakti too. What are the sort of things I'm going to be devoted to? I have to discriminate some things away, like spurious teachers. Go out and find all these dharma teachers, and then mixed in with them are these spurious teachers who don't really know what they're talking about, so you filter them away. So that's a kind of discrimination that's going on. So you see where I'm going here with this. I mean, there's last 2 or 3 questions we've had are all sort of pointing to this necessity for the integration of all yogas, and you have all 4 of them in you. Every one of you do. So you need to find out which one is strongest in you, and then use that to establish yourself in yoga, and then go to the other 3 one by one and begin to increase your abilities in them, so that you can be a purna yogi, a full yogi, or yogini. And you'll find that you don't have to worry about your problems and your karmas, and all those things will go away as you pursue yoga. You don't even have to think, oh, I've got to get rid of these, or later on, where did they go? You see, I woke up one day, my delusion was gone, utterly gone. You just need to persist in the practice, keep taking the dharmic teachings, do your meditations every day, do your mantra, practice discrimination. Those are the kinds of things that will awaken you to your true nature. For a long, long time, as we say. Must practice this yoga for a long, long time. Now, specifically, how does this mental posture help one practice brahmacharya? So brahmacharya is continence or moderation in the case of the householder, absolute celibacy in the case of a person who takes that vow. In the early stages, brahmacharya would be ideally for the youth. You see, they're refraining from any kind of expression of sexuality and gender and so forth. So they're storing up power. And it's a good time for them to do so because they're not married yet. They're not thinking about having children, most likely. And they have this energy stored up from brahmacharya to give towards their studies, to give towards their meditations. And that you need that kind of power stored up inside to be successful in those kinds of practices. So mental posture is going to be strengthened all the more by the four Mahavakyas. He's saying one of them here, all this is Brahman. Might as well be one of the four Mahavakyas. And then others are, this self is Brahman, see, or Brahman is pure intelligence, pragya, pure conscious awareness, pragyanam Brahman they call it. And then tattvamasi, that thou art. So those kinds of thoughts occurring even occasionally in your meditation or even as you go through your day are going to strengthen this mental posture, a mental posture that's usually weakened by phenomena, that is, by negative things happening in your life. Immediately throws you off. This morning when my car died, I just parked it and walked back, you see. I didn't worry about it. So nothing should be able to get in your way of the thing that's most at hand, that is, oh, morning meditation is happening. Deal with that later. So that's a kind of prayaya vritti, you see, process. You just use your already stored up power in yoga, which you should have plenty of if you're practicing brahmacharya and so forth. But it's what I'm saying here in response to this question is that it's heightened and strengthened by these thoughts that this self is Brahman. And everyone can do that non-dual practice, the bhakta and the jnani and the meditator, of course, because in meditation is really where that's beginning to become evident, that I and my Father are one. That's really only going to happen at a very high level of meditation. Nirvikalpa samadhi will result. In the meantime, the bhakta isn't necessarily thinking about non-dual samadhi. It's having some devotional moods pass over the mind, you see. And the jnana is getting inspiration from the scriptures, and the karma is trying to do his work without attachment to the fruits. So whatever field you're in, or particular yoga you're working on in that phase of your life, gets strengthened immensely by that underlying mental asana, we're just calling it, of this self is Brahman. All actions are taking place in nature, not in me, is how Krishna would put that in the Gita. If all actions are taking place in you, then you got a problem. You want to get into an actionless state, then you've got a problem. And we know that many of the great souls have gotten into a state of inaction. In fact, Krishna says action in inaction, and inaction in action. Those who know this know the secret of yoga, of union with Brahman. So, something about this import of all is Brahman in response to and in association with one's daily practice and practice of countenance and storing up power. I think we have only one question left, but we'll save that for next time, as we should end here. And we'll end here with our Sanskrit sloka and then move on to our afternoon class. I hope you'll all join us at that time. Om Bhadram Karnebihi Sriniyama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabir Yajatraha Stirai Rangayesh Tushtuvam Sastanavir Vishema Devahitam Yadayahu. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother of the Universe, with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.